Parents refused financial help from me, praising my brother instead. Now they demand $100,000 after learning my salary and blame me for pressuring him too much. Hi. So I, 28, female, have been working as a fashion photographer for the past 6 years now. Photography was something that I was always passionate about, so I decided to skip college and apply for internships with other well-known photographers, and I landed one right after high school. My first internship was not with a hugely accomplished photographer, and hardly anybody knew him in the business, but I was happy to be working with him nevertheless. Slowly, I started assisting other photographers, watching their work, and the more time that I would spend on shoots, the more I would learn and get confident about my work. Finally, at 22, I got my first solo shoot, and since then, I've never looked back. I've been doing pretty well for myself, and in the last few years, I've consistently made 6 figures every year. So that's a huge accomplishment, but unfortunately, my family has no idea of my accomplishments and still thinks that I'm good for nothing. As a photographer, my job is quite literally just behind the scenes, and we are obviously not as well known as the models we work with. The people in the industry know us, but unless we are extremely popular, most other people don't bother to learn our names, and I don't think I'm at that stage yet. That is probably why every time I go home, my parents make it a point to remind me that my brother is a lot more successful than me at his young age, and that I should do something more respectable instead of wasting my time and energy on photography. My parents had never been happy with me, and for them, my brother had always been the genius of the family. My brother is 2 years younger than me, and when we were in school, he was always better academically and used to be a straight student. I, on the other hand, was more interested in stuff like singing, theater, and even sports, but studying had just never really been my thing. So I was a pretty average student, and my parents constantly compared me to my brother, who was younger than me, but was still doing so much better, and how I should try to live up to the standard he had set. It was just constant, and I used to get into a lot of fights with them over this until I realized no point, they would never appreciate me, so I started ignoring them. My relationship with my parents had always been strained at best, but then, after high school, when I decided that I was not going to go to college and was going to try my hand at fashion photography, my parents just lost it. We fought about this for months, and finally, they told me that if I decided to do this with my life instead of getting a college degree, they would never forgive me and would have nothing to do with me. I did not let that stop me though, because I knew that my relationship with my parents was not my priority at the time. I wanted to be a fashion photographer, and that's what I did with my life. For a few years, they were really upset with me and did not even speak to me. So that was quite difficult for me since I was really quite young, and so, I had to rely on other members of my family for help. The help that I needed was mostly financial, since before that, I had only ever worked part-time jobs over the summer and stuff, and that's all the money that I had, which was way too little to afford to live on my own in a new city. And since I was an intern back then, I didn't get paid much either, so I desperately needed people to help me out, and thankfully, my aunt, my dad's older sister, would often send me whatever I needed to cover my expenses. Her daughter and I have always been great friends growing up, and naturally, she has always had a soft spot for me. But even then, I would still feel quite lonely sometimes, since I didn't have the support of my family and my parents, and my brother had started to act like I never even existed after I left home. My aunt never told my father that she had been helping me out with money, because then, that would lead to arguments between them, since he would definitely accuse her of trying to encourage me to do the wrong thing. But my aunt would keep me updated on how my parents felt about my decision, because every time she would meet them, she would talk to them about me, and most of the time, their reactions were still negative, and they would quickly change the topic, which was quite disheartening for me to hear. But then, one year, all of a sudden, they just insisted that I come back home for the holidays so we could reconnect, and I ended up going back home that year to give our relationship a second chance. I had expected some really emotional reunion, but they were pretty normal about the entire situation. Later on, my mother told me that they had decided to reach out to me because it was pretty clear that I was not going to change my mind, and they did not want to be perceived as the kind of parents who did not support their children's dreams and ambitions, because that would look bad. So I realized that they had only reached back out to me because they wanted to preserve their reputation instead of looking like bad parents, not because they had come to accept my decision. I was really disappointed, but I decided to stay in touch with them because I believed that eventually, I could get them to change their minds about me. I've kept them in the loop about all my achievements and accomplishments in the past couple of years, but even then, it's never felt like they are as proud of me as they are of my brother. My brother graduated with a business degree, and then, he started working with a friend of my dad's. He makes pretty good money too, and my parents are constantly bragging about how my brother started supporting them financially as soon as he started earning. It's not like I hadn't offered to help them out financially myself, but they were the ones who refused to accept my help because of my unconventional career, telling me that they wouldn't feel comfortable taking money from me because they were not sure if I would be able to lead a comfortable life without it myself. I knew for a fact that this was not coming from a piece of concern. This was just them trying to remind me once again that they would rather count on my brother than on me because they did not think that I was doing well enough for myself, and no matter what I did, I was just never going to be good enough for them. Even when I tried to tell them that I would be just fine, and I could support them, they refused to believe me and chose to rely on my brother instead. And it wasn't even like they could do without the help. In the past couple of years, after the pandemic, they had been struggling to stay afloat financially because the cafe that my parents ran had not been doing well. They had already lost a lot of money during the pandemic, and about 2 years ago, they had to shut down and retire early. So that's when my brother started supporting them, and they refused to take my help, and it was really insulting. So after that, I did not even insist on keeping in touch with them anymore. We would only meet each other at family events, and there, I would be as civil as possible, but that was it. I stopped going back home for the holidays as well because I knew that even if I did, they would not appreciate me. They would just use it as an opportunity to berate me and make fun of me. And I didn't need that sort of negativity in my life anymore. I was just done. My relationship with them has gotten significantly worse since then, and nowadays, we hardly even speak to each other. Very few people from the family know about my feelings on this because I don't like talking about it, and one of them happens to be my cousin who recently got engaged. She hosted an engagement party a couple of days ago, and of course, my family was invited and so was I, but I wasn't able to attend because I had the flu. And there, in my absence, my cousin had a conversation with my parents that made them call me up after many years. Before I talk about what happened on the phone call with my parents, I have to talk about what my cousin told me. After the conversation with my parents, I immediately called my cousin up to speak to her about it, and she told me that at the engagement party, my parents had been bragging about how my brother had received a huge promotion at work and now, he would be making almost double the money that he had been making earlier. I don't know if that's true or if they were just exaggerating, but my cousin told me that it was getting on her nerves because not only was worth it making that entire party about themselves, but they were also totally ignoring the fact that they had another kid who was doing just as well in her life, if not better. And she knew that no matter how much I pretended that my relationship with my parents did not affect me, it obviously did. I wanted to make them proud of me, and even though I had achieved so much, it felt like I could never do enough, and that was very upsetting for me. She knew that, so she decided that she was going to put my parents in their place and take a stand for me. And while they were bragging about my brother, my cousin decided to bring up how great it was that now, they had 2 kids who were making 6 figures a year. Obviously my parents were pretty shocked at that because in the past couple of years, they had not bothered to keep in touch with me, and I had never told them about how much money I made because I did not think that was necessary. Anyway, after dropping that bombshell on them, my cousin didn't add anything to it, and later on, the very next day, my parents decided to call me up to ask about it. Of course, when they called me, I was quite surprised, and then, when they asked me if I actually did make 6 figures a year and if I had been making that kind of money for the past couple of years, I decided to tell them the truth because I thought that they were finally calling, since now, they wanted to congratulate me and tell me how proud they were of me. That was pretty stupid and delusional of me because as soon as I said that, they told me that they couldn't believe that they had been pressuring my brother to help them out financially for the past few years, especially when I had already been doing so well for myself. They had the audacity to get upset with me and tell me that I should have told them how much money I was making so that they could make an informed choice about which kid of theirs should be helping them out financially. I was actually speechless, because that was not the reaction that I had been expecting, even though in hindsight, that's exactly the reaction I should have been expecting. And if you guys are not shocked at the audacity yet, let me just tell you guys what happened after that. So, when I did not say anything, my parents started to tell me that they had put a lot of pressure on my brother so far and he hadn't been able to save enough money for himself and his future because he had been busy supporting his parents. That was not the case with me, and now, they wanted me to pay $100,000 as reparations since they were my parents too, and I needed to share my brother's responsibility as well. They made it sound like I had never even offered to help them out, as if I had been evading responsibility so far, whereas it had actually been them who had snubbed me in the beginning. I thought about the situation and I literally just burst out laughing at them before I hung up. I really couldn't think of any other reaction apart from laughing because it was so ridiculous to think that they were actually expecting me to agree to their terms. After that, I spoke to my cousin, got to find out the truth, and since then, I have actively been avoiding them. I already blocked them after the phone call, but then, they started texting me from a burner phone and I blocked that as well. All their messages just say that it was not cool of me to hide how much I had been earning, and if they had known about it in the beginning, they never would have asked my brother to help and would have accepted my help instead. My brother, who generally stays out of these things, recently texted me as well and told me that he doesn't want to take sides, but my parents do have a point. He told me that he also believes that so far, our parents have been treating me unfairly and they should have been more supportive of me. But he also believes that if I really wanted my parents to accept my help initially, when I had offered to take care of their finances, I should have specified exactly how much I make instead of letting them wonder, because it's true that this is not a career that they know much about. They couldn't have known that I'm doing this well for myself. The other thing that he said was that so far, it was just he who had been helping our parents out, but it was true that it was my responsibility as well, because whether I liked to admit it or not, they were my parents, and they had raised me, so I owed it to them. Now, I'm confused about a couple of things because of whatever he said. I obviously don't feel bad for my parents at all, but I do feel bad for my brother because so far, we haven't had a great relationship, but it hasn't been as bad as our parents. And I hate to think about it, but he might have a point? Am I the a-hole for not telling my parents exactly how much I make? Edit. So since there is some curiosity regarding the reason why I never specified to my parents how much money I make while offering to help them out, or even why I never told them about it just to let them know how well I was doing for myself, the reason is pretty simple. First and foremost, I really don't like talking about how much money I make. If I'm telling somebody that I make a decent amount of money and I can help them out if they need it, I want them to trust me. Especially if it's my parents, because why would I lie to them about having enough money to help them out financially? And I know a lot of people measure success by how much money they have made, but I really don't do that. To myself, I am just as successful now as I was when I first started out, because back then, I had been successful in going after my dreams against all the odds, and even now, I'm doing well for myself. So the definition of success for me is not money, and I wanted my parents to be proud of me because I was successful and happy with what I was doing, not just because I was rich. I don't know how to explain it well, but I just don't think that being rich and being successful can be used interchangeably, at least not for me. Besides, it didn't even occur to me that I would need to specify exactly how much money I made to my parents in order to win them over. I guess I've always been a bit delusional about them. I thought that they would treat me just like they treated my brother at some point, but that never ended up happening, and that's why we're all here right now. Anyway, since you guys wanted a reason as to why I never told my parents about my exact income, this was why. I did speak about it with my cousin before any of this, and she told me that I shouldn't have had to tell my parents how much money I make for them to treat me like their child, and I didn't do anything wrong, so that was a huge relief for me, because at least somebody is on my side here. And I also know for a fact that my aunt is also in agreement with my cousin, but then, it's just the fact that my brother had been neutral so far, and now, all of a sudden, even he is against me, so that's what's actually bugging me right now. But I still haven't made up my mind about whether I should feel sorry about it or not, so I'm still open to any advice that you guys have for me. Update 1. Hi, thank you for all the comments. Going through them was a real eye-opener for me. And I guess I really needed that, because I had actually begun to consider that maybe I was wrong here, but I don't think I am anymore. I blocked my brother as well because I realized that, even though he had been neutral so far, that hadn't helped me at all. Even though he had never stood up for me, my cousin had. My aunt had, and truthfully speaking, the only reason he is standing with my parents right now is because my parents have never given him a reason to stand against them. But I have several, that's for sure. Before I blocked him, I replied to him and told him that I really appreciated the fact that he was going out of his way to defend our parents, but he did not grow up in the same home. The parents that he knows are very different from the parents that I know, and he will never be able to realize what I have been through. So it's really unfair of him to say that whether I like it or not, my parents have raised me and I owe it to them to help them out right now. I absolutely don't owe it to them, because whatever they did for me before I turned 18, was required of them by the law. So it's not like doing me some huge favor by taking care of me, and as soon as I was not a minor anymore, I ended up leaving home to fulfill my dreams, and after that, they didn't even speak to me for the next couple of years, let alone support me. At the time, it was just my aunt who had been there for me. Even my brother hadn't been there for me, it had been my cousin who had been supporting me emotionally throughout. So I can hardly even call them my family, because at any stage of my life, they have never even been there for me. If I actually did owe anything to anyone, it would be my aunt. As for the fact that he has been supporting our parents on his own for the past couple of years, that's really not my fault, because it's not like I hadn't offered. But then, they had snubbed me, and I remembered it because that's what made me cut them out of my life. And so far, they did not seem any worse off for it either. But all of a sudden, now that they know how much I make, they want me to make it up to them, even though they haven't even apologized to me. That's really unfair and entitled of them, and I don't feel the need to put up with it. After sending that message, I did not think that I wanted to speak to them anymore, so I blocked him. Since then, I haven't received any message from them personally, but my aunt did contact me and told me that in that message, since I had mentioned that my aunt had been there for me when my parents hadn't, my brother probably passed that message on to my father, and that's how he found out that my aunt had been supporting me in the beginning. And just as we had expected, he lost his mind over it and has been accusing my aunt of leading me astray. He believes that if my aunt had never supported me and told me to go back to my parents and live by their rules, I never would have gone so far away from them in the first place and our relationship would be much better. I literally do not understand why they would think like this because realistically speaking, if my aunt hadn't helped me out, I still would have found some other way to pursue my dreams, but I wouldn't have given up on them. And if I hadn't been able to become a photographer, I wouldn't have been making so much money and doing so well for myself at a job that I love. Then, I would always resent my parents for never letting me do what I want with my life, and I don't understand why they would think that would improve our relationship. I think that it would make it much worse, but I guess they just need a scapegoat to blame at this point, and that's my aunt right now. They have been messaging her nonstop and have been telling her that if she had been a good sister, she would have told me to go back to my parents instead of encouraging my behavior, and she is the reason I am acting like this right now because my bad behavior has apparently always been rewarded. They have even dragged my cousin into this and said that it's not surprising that my aunt's own daughter has turned out to be so rude and classless, since she clearly cannot be trusted with raising children, all because of the way that my cousin called them out at her party. Basically, my parents are insane right now, and even though my aunt has blocked them, she's sure that they're not gonna let this go because they just want to create a huge deal out of this and pretend to be the victims in a situation that they themselves are responsible for creating. And even after all of this, if my brother still thinks that it's appropriate for him to be standing by our parents, then I really have nothing to say to him. I guess I should have seen it coming because even though he had never treated me badly himself, he never stood up against it either. So maybe it's not that surprising anyway. Update 2. Hi. So it's been 2 weeks since my last update and I don't know why, but my parents decided to go public with this drama. I really don't understand what they are hoping to achieve with it, but in the past couple of days, they have made several posts against me and my aunt. And they've been pushing this one-sided narrative, that apparently my aunt had encouraged me to pursue photography, even though it was an unstable career and they did not want that for me. Later, they tried to make amends with me, but I was the one who pushed them away, and when they asked me to help them out with money recently, I did offer to help, but I made it sound like I did not make enough money, and so, they ended up relying on my brother, so they would end up affecting my financial stability. Only recently did they find out the entire truth, and even now, I'm refusing to help them out and putting all the pressure on my brother instead. It's just one-sided and most of it is not even true, but neither my aunt nor I want to engage with them on social media, so we've been trying to text them in person and get them to take it down, and I've even told them that I'd take this up with a lawyer if they don't do as I say. But I guess they can tell that I'm bluffing because obviously nobody's gonna waste their resources on taking up something like this with a lawyer. It's not like this is affecting me in a big way, but it's a mild inconvenience. A lot of people have reached out to me to ask about it, people who I haven't spoken to in years. And I really don't like the fact that they are treating this like a spectacle, which is why I want my parents to take down their posts. Because if they don't, I'm gonna have to post my side of the story along with my aunt, and we don't want to have to do that. So far, it has been completely ineffective, and I guess eventually, we're gonna have to post about it ourselves as well. My cousin thinks that we should go for it, but I'm tired of thinking about all the drama that's going to happen later. Anyway, we just gotta do what we gotta do now. Update 3. So it's been 2 days since my last update, and like I said, because we had no other option, my aunt and I ended up posting our side of the story. Not just our side, but actually the truth, since we didn't want people believing my parents. They haven't had anything to say about it so far, but we have received a lot of supportive comments. I guess the rest of the family hasn't been as clueless as I thought. A lot of them have actually taken note of the fact that my parents have always treated my brother better than me and have been a lot more openly proud of him. I'm really happy that I'm getting all the support, because even though people have never said anything about it so far, at least I know that deep down, all of them are on my side, and that feels nice. My parents haven't had anything to say about it so far, at least not personally. But my brother has emailed me and told me that what I'm doing is seriously messed up. He said that he had been trying to keep the situation with our parents under control and had apparently almost convinced them to take down their posts, but now, they are refusing to do that because I posted my side. He said that he hadn't taken me as somebody who wanted to add fuel to the fire to create more drama, and he's right. I really didn't want to do that, but what other choice did I have? Besides, I also think I've been really unfair to me because it's our parents who started with this, not me. I'm just putting out the truth for everyone to know so that they don't end up hating me or my aunt unnecessarily. Maybe my parents would have thought about it before they went out of their way to create such a nuisance. Anyway, I don't think there's anything left for me to say to my brother anymore because he's clearly picked a side. As for my parents, I was never interested in speaking to them anyway. So if all of them decide to cut me out of their life entirely, it suits me. Update 4. Hello, guys. So it's been quite a few months since my last update, and I recently went back home to attend my cousin's wedding. I was her maid of honor, which meant that I had to be there with her for almost 1 month leading up to the wedding so I could attend everything and fulfill maid of honor duties. She told me that my parents had not been invited and neither had my brother, and it shouldn't have come as a surprise to them because obviously, after what happened a couple of months back, they should have realized that my aunt and my cousin don't want anything to do with them. They hadn't even bothered to apologize to any of us after the incident, so I don't understand why they believed that they would be invited. Not only had they expected to be invited, but they were actually offended when they realized that they hadn't received an invitation and actually showed up at my aunt's house to yell at her. My dad was furious and told her that she couldn't just cut him out of her life over something so petty, and that's pretty ironic coming from a man who literally cut his daughter out of his life. Anyway, my aunt did not take any BS from him and instantly put him in his place that day. They had a huge fight, and now, my parents are running their mouths off talking about us to whoever will entertain them, but it's mostly just people who want to gossip, and I don't think anybody's gonna take it seriously. I haven't heard from my brother, and it's sad that he's chosen to side with our parents, but well, that's his call to make. The wedding was beautiful and it all went smoothly. I even got to spend a lot of time with my aunt and my sister, so that was just the cherry on top. I'm back to work now, but I got a much needed break, and it's good to know that my parents haven't changed a bit, even in the past couple of months.